Today's guest is Irene Turtle, and she is a person who helps executives and entrepreneurs. She coaches them to get to their success, but she started her career in HR. And I work with a lot of HR people in what I do, and I know that HR is really the lifeblood because they handle so much of what goes on inside a company. But at some point, she put that aside and started her own career, and that's what we're going to talk about today. Hey, Irene, welcome to Cool Things Entrepreneurs Do.
Hi, Tom. I'm thrilled to be here. Thank you for having me.
Thank you. So why don't you tell everybody, who is Irene and what do you do?
Well, I am a lot of different things, but what I do these days is I coach, I speak, and I do a lot of facilitation for workshops and retreats. And the coaching part is really I suppose my passion. And when I speak, I'm usually talking about helping entrepreneurs and executives build their leadership skills because, having spent a long time in recruiting and in the corporate world, mostly as an HR person, I saw a lot of great leadership and I saw a lot of horrible leadership.
Yeah, that's the way all of us who have worked, put in our dues in corporate America. We've had the great bosses and we've had the horrible bosses.
Yeah. And I think, the higher up in HR you get, sometimes you feel like you need a bigger shovel because you have a front row seat and sometimes you can see behind the curtain. So I've always been fascinated by what makes people tick. Not just leaders, but everybody. Why is one person why is Tom such a great communicator on the podcast? Why is so-and-so a great influencer? Why is someone great at doing all that detailed work that I hate to do? So I've always been fascinated by that. So I have a real passion for helping people find out what they're passionate about and helping them get there.
So how did you end up going from corporate, the corporate world? How did you go from that into having your own business? How long ago did you do that? And what caused you to say, yeah, I'm done here. I'm going to go do my own thing?
Well, I think, I've always been, I always say in the people business. I've always, one of my great loves was when I was a recruiter, finding the perfect person for that perfect job. And you make that connection and everybody's thrilled, the client's thrilled. The candidate's thrilled, and I always said it was my drug of choice because it's a great feeling when you are able to do that. And then I moved more into, I did a lot of consulting and I did more what we call traditional HR, and there was succession planning and leadership and all that other things. And I started to realize there was a lot of what I did every day that I didn't enjoy. I actually didn't enjoy it at all. And I always loved the coaching, the building relationships, again, when it was recruiting, finding, because you can coach all you like if you don't have the right person in the job. That's kind of where it all starts. And the last corporate job I had was in financial services. And you know where I'm going with this because in 2007, things started to unravel, and I hung in there until probably the beginning of 2009. And it's a little bit not a little bit scary. It's a lot scary to start your own company, especially in the middle of the biggest recession that we've ever known. But I thought, if I don't do it now, when am I going to do it?
Yeah, that's what happened to me. It was April 1st, 2009 when I got laid off. And, I'd love to say I never looked back. I looked back a lot, but I just kept going forward. But so you've been doing this now for, coming up on a decade if you started in 2009. So what is it that you love about this new world, this entrepreneurial shift that you took?
I love working with entrepreneurs because, one of my core values is risk taking, even though until I really started until I went out on my own, I never really thought of myself as a risk taker, but I've always been. And so I love working with entrepreneurs because that's what they do. And I love working with people who are truly passionate about what they do. And I also work with a lot of people who don't know that yet. So helping them find that out it's just great, helping people get out of their own way a lot of the time and helping them develop behaviors that are going to make them more successful is so gratifying and so rewarding that how could I do anything else, Thom?
So you never look back and think, oh boy, I wish I had that old corporate job back?
Oh, I've looked back many, many times, and I'll be very honest with you. Sometimes I've thought what I wouldn't give for that paycheck, but that's probably the only part I miss. And sometimes I miss the collaboration of working with, a team of great people. But overall, there aren't enough probably zeros on that check to make me want to go back there, to be honest with you.
So you've been in the United States, this stint, you said, for 20 years, and you were here once before. What's the difference between entrepreneurship in America and maybe entrepreneurship in Ireland? Or maybe there's no difference. What do you see? I know you go back a lot because your mom is still there and you have family and friends. What do you see as the big differences?
Well, I think it's changed quite a lot too over the last 20 or 30 years because there are so many regulations now in Europe with the EU. But so I think that's some of the difference. But I think if you're an entrepreneur and if you're motivated to do something really exciting, you're going to find a way wherever you are. I travel a lot. I'm a world traveler. I love to travel. So I meet entrepreneurs all over the world. And I think what's exciting about these people, our people, is that there's always going to find a way. But I know in Ireland now, I notice every time I go back, there are a lot of regulations and a lot of things. People tell me that if I worked over there, I couldn't do. And I always like to focus on what I can do rather than what I can't do. So I think that's probably one of the differences. But I think I'm always drawn to people who know what they are excited about and take the risk and are willing to go for it.
So what type of regulations do they have that would stop someone from being a consultant or a coach? I don't understand how do you regulate that? That's a hard thing to stop.
Yeah, well, there are those people that say ask for forgiveness, not for permission. I have a friend in London who is a marketing consultant, and she's always, telling me about all the things that she has to do, the financial regulations and all the other reporting regulations and things that we don't have to do here necessarily when you're getting started off. But to be honest, after a while, I stopped listening to her because it's just too negative and too, okay, well, maybe I won't move back there and start my practice.
So if somebody wants to go off and start their own thing, or maybe another recession comes along and they get pushed out and they're thinking about it now so they can sort of have a plan B in place, what advice would you have for somebody who wants to leave that corporate job to do their own thing?
Well, I think, obviously having a great idea is very important, but I think everything that I do is based on self-awareness. So the idea of, being able to get up and work in your pajamas or, not have a schedule sounds appealing when you can't do that. But knowing what you can do and what you can't do, what you're passionate about, what you hate to do, and figuring out, is that enough? Because there are so many things as a business owner, even a solopreneur, which is what I am most of the time, so many things you have to do that you don't necessarily like to do and don't know how to do. So if
Yeah, I just finished my taxes, and I have a bookkeeper and I have an accountant, but there's still a lot of it that I have to do. And then they come back with the numbers and I cry myself to sleep that I have to pay so much in taxes. And I don't like doing the numbers. And I told my wife next year she's going to have to do it with me, because if I got hit by a bus, I don't know if she'd even know where to start. So, that's a nightmare, some of the stuff we have to do.
Yeah. What I think is, it really, a lot of it comes down to money, unfortunately. Can you afford to do this wonderful idea that you have, bring it into fruition? What are you going to live on? How are you going to pay your rent? Some basic stuff like that. Can you consult or be a freelance person doing what you really know how to do now and do the other thing at night or at the weekends or whatever? Because I think the biggest thing I see is that people just run out of money, and then the passion isn't enough. So, being aware of the money, but also being aware of where their real talents and strengths lie and what they love to do. And, a few other things like, what makes you happy? What does success mean to you? Because that seems kind of obvious, right? But a lot of people, I have clients all the time, when I ask that question, there's stony silence at the other end. And, when you're 20, that's maybe the first time you've ever thought of that. But, when you're 50 and you've just been laid off from your job of 30 years, it's maybe the first time you've ever thought of it as well. What does success mean? Does success mean making $1 million every year? Or does success mean, paying your bills, but absolutely loving getting up every day and doing what you do? What makes you happy? Seems kind of obvious, but a lot of people don't necessarily think about it or plan around it.
Well, I mentor a young man, and I keep asking him, what do you want to do? And he's 30, about, and I go, what do you want to do? And he keeps fighting answering the question, because I think sometimes he thinks that if he picks one thing, that's the only path he can do. And it's like, what a lot of people forget is that successful entrepreneurs, a lot of them fail. And then and you have to pivot. And so, picking a lane does not mean that's your lane forever. It's just you get some momentum. And if it turns out you don't like it, or you're not good at it, or you don't want to do it, you can shift. It's much easier to pivot and shift lanes than to go from a dead stop forward. And so, it is interesting when you said that, how many people can't answer that question, whether they're 20, 30, 50, or beyond.
Yeah, and it's one of the things that I find so fascinating, first of all, but also so exciting, is to help people go on that journey. Because, if you don't know what success means to you, and if you don't know what makes you happy, then it's sort of like, I know you live in Austin. It's like saying, well, I'm going to Austin and I need you to tell me how to get there, but I'm going, well, why are you going to Austin? What are you going to do there? What's the big deal about Austin? So if you don't know why you're going there, getting there, the how is actually the easy part. It's the why.
Although that's a bad example, because everyone knows why you come to Austin, because it's awesome.
Yes, I actually used the example of somewhere else that shall remain nameless yesterday, but yeah. Everybody wants to go to Austin, including me, Tom.
That's right. Well, if you come, I'll show you where the good barbecue and the good tacos are.
Okay, great. I look forward to that.
So coming out of HR, you obviously saw a lot of people who were successful in their careers and some people who weren't. And now that you've been coaching entrepreneurs, you see that a lot of people have amazing potential. And we get sort of sidetracked in our lives in the society that we live in. We think, oh my gosh, Becky has so much potential. But potential is not a solution, and potential doesn't equal results. So why do you think some people go farther across the gap between potential and results and achieve great things, where other people fall into the gap and get stuck? What's that delta?
Well, I think when you're talking about leaders or even individual contributors, in the world that we live in, in America or Western Europe, most people, their entire life from their, very young, once they get out of play school, everything is focused on how smart we are, our IQ, how well we do in exams, what university you go to, what your grades are. And most people get hired because of their IQ. And I think what makes them successful often in their role, whatever that is, the IQ gets them hired, but the EQ, the emotional intelligence, keeps them there and gets them another job and makes them successful. So not just when you're a leader, when you're managing other people, but as an individual. And again, it's, for a lot of people who don't, you're probably going to ask me, what's emotional intelligence, Irene? And, back in the old days, pre-1994 or something, it was what we called soft skills or people skills. Our ability to relate to other people, our communication skills, our ability to influence, our, impulse control. I worked in entertainment for a long time, so that's one I'm very familiar with. And all sorts of other things. So I think that's the differential is, very few people, even when they work in a cube, all night on their own, they still have to get along with somebody and communicate and work with other people. So for me, that is a lot of the differential.
No, that makes a lot of sense. So Irene, I call the show Cool Things Entrepreneurs Do. What's the coolest thing you're doing with your business right now?
Well, I'm a bit of I have to tell you, Tom, I'm a bit of a assessment junkie. So I love working with different assessments, and I've worked with a ton of them, from MBTI to DISC to all sorts of things. And I'm working with one right now. It's based on the Gallup Strength Finders. It's a system called Core Clarity. And it really helps not only individuals, but especially teams see their talents individually and collectively in color. It's a wonderful system, and it's very exciting. So I've added that into my toolkit, because all coaches have a big toolkit. So, and I'm doing a lot of speaking too, which I'm very excited about, because again, when you start your own business, as you know, it's not who you know, it's who knows you. So it's getting out there and being able to tell more people about what you do and how you do it.
Yeah, especially when you work in the world that you do or that I do. If people don't know who you are, you can't be on the short list. I do some business development work with law firms and other professionals. I'll go in and speak at their partner meetings or whatever. And I always talk about the fact that, in the past, they've brought in all these people who try to teach them sales skills and this, and the lawyers kind of turn it out, or the left-brained accountants, whoever it is, any professional person, they're like, blah, 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 I'm not in sales for a reason. But I always tell them that it's not about the sales, it's about getting on the short list. If you're not making that short list of the 3 people who, the 3 firms that they're going to interview, it doesn't matter. You're never going to have a chance to win the business. So instead of focusing on how do I win the business, focus on how do I get on more short lists? Because I find that if somebody talks to me, if it's a corporation having a sales kickoff, or if it's an association having a meeting, and they talk to me, most of them decide I'm a good fit, and they'll use me either that year or the following year. But if they don't talk to me, I can't win the business. So my whole goal is I have to get on the short list. And for a lot of us in roles like yours and mine, it's word of mouth. So you have to put yourself out there and let people know that you're a good choice to refer. So I think you're right on to all that. Now, you've been doing a lot of speaking. Are you just speaking in the United States, or you're such a global person? Do you speak around the world?
I've done 1 or 2 things, but mostly it's here. Mostly it's here in Southern California.
I think I shared with you my secret goal is I want to speak in Ireland. So I don't even care. I don't even care what they pay me as long as I don't lose money. My grandfather was born in County Mayo, and my grandmother was born somewhere in the center of Ireland. I'm not as familiar with the exact location, but they both came here in the 1900s. But I grew up in a big Irish family, and I've been back and visited, but I've always thought that the grand thing for the grandson of a guy who had to liquidate a farm after both his parents died and take his siblings, he was 16, take his siblings who went down to age 4 and go try to start over somewhere. I thought that would be a pretty good thing to get to go back and speak in his home country.
Oh yeah, and there's so much global business in Ireland now. There's so many tech companies, so many pharmaceuticals and biotech and everything and a lot of conferences going on there now. So I don't think, Tom, that will be too difficult a thing for you to accomplish one of these days.
Well, that's my big goal. So we'll see if we can accomplish that. So, So Irene, I love to ask the people who come on the show who it is they admire, because I think entrepreneurs are observers, and I think to do a job like you do, you're constantly observing both your clients but also other people out in the business world. So when I ask in the entrepreneur sphere, who do you think is doing cool stuff? Who comes to mind?
Mm-hmm. Well, I can give you sort of a bevy of names, from Richard Branson all the way down. But I think the people I admire the most are people that you'll never have heard of. They're clients that I've worked with in the last couple of years. And if any of them are listening, it'll be AJ and Derek and Shannon. And what I admire about them, like I said before, is their willingness to just go for it, and also taking those risks, and above all else, failing and getting up again. And I've been there when they failed, and I've been there when they're bruised and, I'm just going to go back to my old job and so on. And they don't, and they keep going and they start something else. So I think I could give you a lot of the names out there, but I think those are the people that I admire the most, because they haven't, they're not big names yet, and maybe they never will be, but I just admire them so much for their resiliency and their tenacity and their risk taking and their courage.
Well, hopefully AJ, Derek, and Sharon will listen to this so they know that you admire them that much. But I actually love it when people have answers like that. We hear a lot of Elon Musk, but a lot of different reasons why. We hear a lot of Richard Branson, et cetera. But I love it when people have, that they admire. I had someone one time talk about their dry cleaner and why they admired them. I think that stuff is, that's what really makes this all work, because most entrepreneurs are never going to be Richard Branson. And most of us are going to be out there, fighting the good fight every day. So I think that is admirable. So hello to those three if they listen. My last question I ask everybody is, what do you do to give back to the greater good? Because I think as entrepreneurs, making money is important, but I think we should find some way, even small, to leave our mark.
Yeah. Well, I think I grew up in a family that was very, service oriented, and I do lay counseling now. So I work with people who can't afford to have a therapist, and it's not really therapy. It's 10 sessions of, having someone to listen to them. But I think probably the most interesting thing I ever did to give back was it's back in the time when AIDS was still a big, scary notion. I decided I was going to work in that area, but I also wanted to do public speaking. So I decided to train to be an AIDS in the workplace facilitator. And that was probably one of the most rewarding things I've ever done. But I believe whatever you do, it's doing something that you are passionate about. Just to do something good isn't enough. It has to feed your soul. And that's a little bit selfish, but that's okay.
No, that's all right. And I love both. I love all those examples. And I love the fact where you said you're just someone that people can listen to. There was an article last year, I think October of 2017, in Harvard Business Review. And it was written by, and I'm going to probably mess up his name, Vivek Murthy, who is the former Surgeon General under President Obama. And he wrote an article about the epidemic of loneliness. And it's one of the most powerful articles I've read in a long, long time. I've read it a couple of times. And he talked about the fact that even with all the connectivity, with all the social media, with all the digital platforms that we have, people are feeling more alone than they ever have. So the fact that you're doing that for people I think it's awesome.
Yeah, I think it's so, when you do that work, you realize, like you said, how many people don't have or don't feel they have someone they can talk to or someone who can listen. And it's not really about, like in coaching, we try and really focus on outcomes. And I think I always do that with them too. But it's not about trying to help them necessarily reach a goal, but process, their information or their what's going on with them, whether it's grief or whether it's job loss or, whatever it is, I love doing it. And again, I think whatever you do as a service to others, you have to love doing it as well. And I didn't always think that, and I didn't always enjoy it. So now that's something that's really important to me too.
Yeah, well, I think that's important. And like I said, there's this epidemic of loneliness out there. And if we can all just take a second to see people. In fact, there's a hashtag I use once in a while on Twitter, hashtag see people. And I try to remind people that sometimes it's even the life of the party. The extrovert can be feeling very alone. It's not just the person who's by themselves. So we have to pay attention to that. Well, Irene Turtle, this has been a delightful conversation. Do you have any last entrepreneurial nuggets of wisdom you want to share with the audience?
I think, the only thing I would say is, be true to yourself, figure out what makes you happy. And also who you are, what your real talents are, because often we're told we should do something or we ought to do something or you're good at that, therefore you should do this. And listening to yourself and knowing yourself and trusting your gut and going for it, even when everybody else tells you it's not such a great idea. Because the worst thing that'll happen is that it won't work out, but at least you won't be sitting there 20 years later wondering whether you should have done it or not.
God, I agree with that so much. I mean, I spent 20 years with my ladder against the wrong wall because I did what everybody told me I should do. So, and then finally, accidentally, after getting laid off, I followed my own passion, and I've had a lot more fun the last 9 years.
Yeah, great. Well, you just said it. I love that expression, ladder against the wrong wall. I might have to steal that from you, Thom.
It's not mine. I found it somewhere else. So
okay.
So, and part of what I teach people when I do my seminars and my classes is that, you constantly, no matter what you do, even if your ladder's against the right wall, you still have to be trying new things because we're not going to get different results if we keep putting in the same effort. So, even if things are going well, you still should tweak it a little bit and go out and try some new things. My life is better because the last 2 years I've lived under this try new things mantra, and I've tried all kinds of stuff that I wouldn't have done before or that might have scared me or whatever. And I think I'm a better person. I think I'm a better speaker. I think this podcast is better. So I'm going to tell everybody as we leave to try new things because that's how I kind of end the show. But before we end the show, if somebody listened to this and they're like, I've got to find this person, this Irene Turtle, how do I find her? How do they find you?
Well, my website is turtleexecutivecoaching.com.